Good morning, everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here. We're getting started, and it's already packed. I expected it to get more crowded as the day goes on. But before we get started, I want to just give you all a shout out. This means so much to us at the City of Little Rock that you're here. It means so much to the African American Mayors Association that you're here, because we are trying to level up finances for underrepresented groups in our city. So our black and brown brothers and sisters, it's for us. We want to make sure that we have the wealth of our counterparts and make sure that we have the resources and access to make that happen. Before we get started, before we bring out our panelists, I see Mayor Frank Scott Jr. in the house. Mayor Scott, will you come up here and join us real quick? Let's give it up for our mayor, the people's mayor. Mayor Scott is the past president of the African American Mayors Association, and because of his leadership, we have gotten this grant to be able to do CapitalCon. So Mayor Scott, I want you to talk a little bit about the importance of economic mobility and why we're here today.
Well, good morning, everybody. Y'all doing all right? I just want to take this opportunity to share appreciation to the African American Mayors Association, the Economic Mobility Leadership Institute that is putting on this event in partnership with the City of Little Rock. They gave us this grant because we understand that financial literacy is key to building wealth. But not only building wealth, closing the racial wealth gaps that we have across these United States of America. And it starts with each of you. And if we don't understand the process, we can't build the process. And with that being said, we're excited about our team. Kendra Pruitt really leading this effort alongside everyone with the City of Little Rock staff. I want to shout out to City Director, Ward 1 Director, Virgil Miller. If you raise your hand, please. He's been in the banking business for quite some time, so if you get a chance, please visit with him because he can give you some tips as well. Again, it's about how do we close racial wealth gaps, how do we build wealth, and ultimately, how do we ensure that we all are playing a part of the process. Kendra?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your leadership on making this important thing happen. We're going to jump right into the Building Generational Wealth panel. Let's bring up our panelists. As you all know, we're talking building generational wealth. I want to just share their names. We'll get into what they do and where they work when they're on stage. But let's start with Brandon Brown. Brandon Brown is a partner at Encompass Realty Group. Give him a round of applause, everybody. Yeah. We also have Myron Jackson, the founder and CEO of the Design Group Marketing Agency. Let's give it up for Myron. And we also have Shamim Okolo, VP of Community Outreach at Encore Bank. Give it up for your favorite banker, as she calls herself. Give it up for Shamim. Y'all give it up for this awesome panel. Y'all have a seat. That's major. It's like the Negro League. I know we have Daryl Callum, who I think stepped out to the restroom, but we'll have him join us here in a little bit. Thank you all so much for being here. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Say what's up to the people.
What's up, y'all?
I can greet them in Swahili.
Oh, let's hear it.
Okay, habari, and then your response is going to be Missouri, like the state, okay? So, habari.
Missouri.
You're bilingual for today.
So fancy, so fancy. Well, this is very casual, you all, but I want to make sure that you all are getting the information you need and want to move up that economic ladder. And so this is family. We're going to ask you all to think of questions at the end as well, but we want to jump right into it. And so, Brandon, I want to start with you.
Let's go.
Brandon, as I mentioned, is the partner at Encompass Realty Group, but also there's an investment firm called Encompass as well that you're a partner with. And as I understand, you have a diverse background in a multitude of businesses, but let's lean into the investment side first and foremost. Can you talk a little bit with our crowd about various investment vehicles and why is it important to use investing as a tool to build generational wealth?
Listen, investing is always important. I guess the biggest thing would be is to always make sure that you are diversified. So there's a number of vehicles out there in terms of, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. But, oftentimes people love this conversation because it's really sexy around investing, right? But what I try and teach my clients is something that's far more fundamental, far more basic. That is understanding just the power of your income. Protecting that income is really important. Having the right principles in terms of money management. All of those things will lead you into having the ability to be able to invest and make you eligible to be able to invest, right? So 3 to 6 months of savings in cash is something I believe is basic. That's kind of a starting point, right? Protecting your income with, the proper insurances, right? We protect cars and televisions and all these things, but we don't protect the number one thing that allows us to afford those things, which is our income. So I think those things, addressing those things first, and then you get into being able to have conversations around how to invest and the proper way to go about that. I mean, there's real estate invest. There's tons of that.
Right.
But putting yourself in a position to be able to invest, I think is really a more important conversation.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a good segue to hear from Shamim. And we're going to rewind in a little bit. But Shamim, being Vice President of Community Outreach at Encore Bank, she knows all about that money management. And so we hear folks wanting to build generational wealth, and we want capital, and we need all these things. But as Brandon mentioned, there are some basic things that you all look for as a financial institution that individuals and or businesses need to have in line before you all are even able to extend credit. Can you talk a little bit about some of those kind of nuts and bolts that you all may look for at the bank?
Sure. And so we at Encore Bank and most of my financial partners, I know we have some banks in the room. We are all peers in the industry, and we try to support our community. But most people will talk about the 3 C's. We're going to need capital, collateral, and credit. And so a lot of times, and Marion and I were talking backstage about that, when clients come to me at the bank, when they have a need for a business loan, it's already too late. It's too late. So the back of what people don't understand, in addition to those 3 things, which is the most critical part, is building a relationship with your banker. Or a banker, or like the other demographic does, the white folks, they have multiple bankers. And they start those conversations early, they build those relationships early, and then we get to know your dream and your goals. But from the perspective of when you do come to the bank, we are going to look for, and I normally ask for 3 documents. I'm going to want 2 years of your tax returns. Most people are going to be LLC, so your Schedule C is going to go along with that. We're going to ask for a profit and loss statement, and we're going to ask for a personal financial statement. And so most people do not have a personal financial statement, and we have, it's an Excel spreadsheet. I can email it to you all if you need it to build it up, but that's how folks figure out your net worth. But the most critical part on that personal financial is what Brandon talks about. We're going to look at how much cash do you already have in the bank? Do you have that 6 months? If you need $200,000 from us and your note to us every month is $1,000, and something happens to your bank, it's low season, it rains out or snows out and people don't come to your boutique, are you able to pay us back and service the debt? And a lot of times, entrepreneurs and small business owners will fall back onto their savings. And so having savings is important, having collateral is important, and so that's home ownership. That is, if you have a business, do you have a contract with the city of Little Rock? We can take a contract and your receivables as collateral. And then the last part is going to be credit. Most people think that you have to build a business credit score. And the internet is going to tell you that in a reel. However, I've been at the bank for 2 years. I have never, and we have never checked a business credit score. Guess whose score we're going to check? Your score. We're going to check your personal score. We're going to check your personal debt. How are you managing your personal finances? Because if you're a sole proprietor, how you balance your finances personally is more than likely going to line up with how you do it for your business. And so, these are kind of like the basics that we want to talk to you about before you need the deal. But the most critical part is being able to come to us, have that discussion, bring your financials with us, and then hopefully we can finance the dream.
That was a lot of gems dropped right now. How many of you have a relationship with a bank? Just by a show of hands. You have a banker that you have a relationship with, you can sit and talk to. I see quite a few. That's awesome. If you don't yet, please find a banker that you know and trust at an institution that you feel comfortable with. There's research you can do on various institutions. I know Shamim takes time, her own personal time, just to inform you without trying to sell you on anything at her particular institution, but just to inform you about those things. And so please take her up on that. I want to shift gears a little bit to talk to Myron. If you know anything about Myron, he's the big boss around here in the city of Little Rock. But a little history, Myron was an intern at LaFace Records. Is that right? You started, worked your way up at LaFace as a marketing executive before founding the design group back home in Little Rock. And what is really interesting, we know entrepreneurship is kind of a buzzword and everyone wants to start a business, as they should. Multiple streams of income, we'll talk about that later. But Myron, I want you to talk a little bit about how generational wealth is actually attainable. You're a black boy from the east end of Little Rock. Before it was East Village, but when it was East End, coming of age during banging in the rock. Can you talk a little bit about your path to entrepreneurship and building wealth, and that's a reality for you?
Okay, let me tag that a little bit. You know, I don't care how many years removed, I travel all around this country, and the first thing they'll say when I tell them I'm from Little Rock, oh, banging in Little Rock. I said, unfortunately, that is a tag that's associated with this city, but we've got so many amazing things that it transcends just that moment in time. However, I am from the East End. Folks like to say East Little Rock. It was East End for us. And a really interesting community. I tell everyone that I was blessed to be reared in a community that was rich in everything. I mean, we were rich in everything but money. Okay, so it created an interesting dynamic where you have this beautiful tapestry of all these different personalities of folks who are trying to figure out how to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. I saw a lot of talented folks who were enterprising, figuring out how they would go about trying to take care of their families, and then hopefully leave a little bit for their children's children. But when you talk about LaFace, yes, I was fortunate enough to be professionally reared in the house that Hits built. So I'm really excited about that. I tell everyone hip-hop took me out of the ghetto. What it did uniquely is that I remember one of my first days at the office, and I was so excited about, you know, being at the home of, at the time, Goody Mob, Tony Braxton, all these folks that you guys might be too young to appreciate. But Tony Rich Project, anybody remember the Tony Rich Project? Okay, good deal, amazing artist. And first day I was there, I was like, man, I'm so excited. I started my internship because I need to find a job to change my life. And one of the executives shared with me something that was profound that stuck with me, Virgil, was that he shared that you don't need a job, son. You need income. And welcome to the home of where we create entrepreneurs who generate income. And it started one thing for me in a mind shift. Now, I do share this to say that it's not an either or for some folks. For some folks, it can be a both and, okay? I want to preface that because I don't want to upset any of my corporate clients, and I thank you all. But the reality is for me in that shift in understanding that in America, oftentimes, for especially poor folks and poor folks of color, the little and limited access we have to any financial literacy or education, we really taught, go to school. And I remember my grandma, she beat it in my head to death, guys. Go to school, go to school, go to school, go to school. She just didn't help me understand what you do with all that education once you got it, because she didn't understand. And one of the things that I found is that in America, we're taught that if you really work hard and you go to school, you get a great job. And that great job, and many of us probably have great jobs. But oftentimes with those great jobs, you have limitations. Oftentimes you got to work the corporate environment. Oftentimes you got to work within the pay scale. Now some of us are way up here on the pay scale. Some of us are way down here on the pay scale. But nevertheless, you have limitations. Interesting quote that Chris Rock shared is that wealth is not about having a lot of money. Wealth is about having a lot of options, okay? And what an entrepreneur really gains in terms of taking that track is now you get to explore a wealth of options in terms of how do you create income for yourself. So when I launched my business, realistically now in this industry, multicultural communications, it's been 27 years.
Y'all, can we give it up for that 27 years as an entrepreneur? That's tough.
What I quickly figured out is that I'm either going to sell my time or I'm going to allow someone to buy my time. Now, understand there's some overlap in that because there's some folks willing to buy your time for a nice price, right? Okay, and I ain't mad at y'all who are getting it. But here's what's interesting, is that if you out there looking for a great job and they say the salary is between $5 and $5 million, that means someone in that organization has decided this is the amount that we're buying your time for. If you fall within that window, you can apply and we'll vet you, and the one with the perfect fit will choose you. On the entrepreneur side of the house, I decided I'm not going to let someone create a parameter for me. I'm going to sell my time. Now, where others may say, well, I said between $5 and $1 million or $5 million, whatever. I may say today my time is worth X, and it may not fit within that parameter. And what I found in that 27 years, even on my worst days, I made more money than I would have made if someone was telling me how much they were going to buy my time for. Does that make sense? So I'm not knocking those who have W-2s. Hey, do your thing. And what I found over my career, I've run across folk who have great W-2s, but they also have some element of their portfolio where they're the owner. They're selling their time. So what I found in terms of building, and I'm always leery about this, using the term generational wealth, because every day I wake up and say, I don't think I have enough. You know, I don't think I have enough. I'm always worried, do I have enough to take care of my family when I no longer can generate the income? Have I created enough assets to create a passive income when I can't actively generate the income? And have I accumulated enough to make sure that my children's children can benefit from my time on this planet? So I will say for me in that shift, coming from the east side where I saw a lot of folk who were hardworking, who were talented, who oftentimes had to figure out from the limited education they had, how would they start to sell their time? Now I'm gonna be very careful and tiptoe around this. Selling your time depends on that product or that service that you've decided you're gonna utilize to try to grow wealth. You may have grandma's sweet potato pie recipe. But that does not necessarily mean it's going to translate to a viable business. That doesn't mean that viable business is going to scale to a level where you can create generational wealth. But what it does do is give you an opportunity to leverage an asset, that recipe, leverage that asset to monetize your time, and then you can sell that time.
Awesome.
If I can piggyback on something you said too. The term generational wealth is really popular. It's really trendy right now. And I'm not a huge fan of it, honestly, because just because you acquire wealth does not mean that the next generation is going to be equipped to properly manage it. Something that a lot of people don't know is 70% of wealthy families, they lose that generational wealth by generation one. 90% of wealthy families lose that wealth by generation two. So what needs to be understood is not so much this idea around this sexy term that is generational wealth, but just understanding that in the home, teaching sound financial principles, savings, spending, understanding as black folks, who are we as consumers, right? Absolutely. What are we buying? What are we attracted to? How does our dollar circulate? You know, all of those things are important. Myron and I can talk for hours about entrepreneurship, but it's the small, fundamental financial habits that you build and that you teach in the home that translates to generational wealth.
Absolutely. Fully agree. That's the beauty of it. I'm going to come to you right in a second, but I want to just emphasize a couple things that we've heard. fascinating story from Myron that we'll circle back to, and great points by Brandon. But this is why this is important, because you have to have the conversation about financial literacy. But we also know that saving doesn't get us generational wealth. It doesn't acquire wealth. That's not how we get there. And we can talk about savings accounts all day and money management, but how do we make sure that this popular trendy term of generational wealth is a reality for our families? And that's why I want to lean into Shamim. Shamim is a banker by day, but she knows the importance of streams of income and entrepreneurship as well, as she's really trying to establish generational wealth for her children. And she can talk a little bit about that. So Shamim, if you don't mind, share a little bit about your path to generational wealth for your family.
Yes, and I want to go back 3 years ago. First of all, I did DoorDash 3 years ago. I have never spoke publicly about it till this week when I was, advertising that I'll be here. And one of the folks I delivered DoorDash to was actually Myron. Yes, it was my last run. I tried not to do it at the end of the, before the sun came out. I can't fight. I'm African. We don't fight. I can't do it. I can't run. So I tried to do it when the sun was still out. And it was my last run, and I had known about him in the community. I was working in nonprofit at the time. I wasn't at the bank. But I wanted, and I normally pay cash for my vacations. I don't put anything on a credit card. So the DoorDash was my side gig to take my babies to Disney, and we planned that for 2 years, and it made it work. So to be on the stage today is such an honor.
That is an amazing story.
3 years later. But I want to introduce my children. So as he spoke so eloquently about the transfer of generational wealth, my babies normally roll around with me in my banking world and in the ecosystem. My friends are familiar with them. But I'm going to introduce them to the stage, and I'm going to let them, come on. Come on,
give it up for her babies.
Hi, my name is Liam, and I'm in 5th grade. I am currently writing a book, Ella the Banker, and it's due to be released January 9th. So you can buy 100 copies if you want. I won't mind.
What a salesman. I love it.
Hi, my name is Ella. I'm in 3rd grade, and my mom and brother have written a book called Ella the Banker, like he said, about me. And you can buy 100,000 million billion copies. Because, there's never too much books.
That's right.
Slay.
I love it.
Thank you. And so I am very fortunate whenever I transition from the nonprofit sector for a decade to Encore Bank, right? It is a startup bank. We're in year 4. I joined when they're in year 2, and I have been able to see how a bank is built as a business. This is a business model. However, Chris Roberts, our CEO, his dad was a banker. So he had this wealth of knowledge and connections. And what I've been able to see when I'm in these spaces, in these rooms, my mentor, Virgil Miller, I had coffee with you the first time when I got the job, and I was like, oh my God, Virgil, what do I do, right? So it's been great leaning onto the wisdom of people who've come before me. However, how do I then set my children up for that? One of the things that I was able to see as a problem, I am a W-2, but I'm also that mix that I want that stream of income, is we don't have a lot of women who are commercial bankers, okay? So when I have a deal and I can't roll it we can't do it at Encore, I'm gonna call Andrea for security. I'm gonna call Kim Lee at Hope. I'm gonna call our network. I did not have a black commercial woman loan officer in the city of Little Rock in 2 years. I've only met one, she's in Northwest. So my son has wanted to write a book since he was in 3rd grade. And then my daughter wanted to be famous. And then I met with Wesley earlier this year, January 2nd. And I was like, oh yeah, my son wanted to write a book. And we went home and I talked to my son and I said, listen, can we write a book about what I want to talk about? Your second book, I'll fund it. You can write it about anything. And so for a year, we have worked, we have a hired coach, we brought in the system, a CPA, we have an attorney for trademark, we have the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation that has been able to provide us support in this journey. But then at the end of the day, it is a business. And I want my children to know this space, right? When I opened up the business bank account with them, I went down with them in their uniform at school at 4 o'clock. I know my banker. I call him, hey, we're coming in after I pick up the kids, so that they can understand the process of what I'm signing. They see the LLCs, they see the docs, and I keep it at child level, but then the business pays them, right? So they earn a check, which up to $12,000 is tax-free, so I pay them more than I pay myself. But I want them to be able to understand the business and the boring side of business, so that when money starts rolling in, and their dad is here, Max, we co-parent well. We talk about what does this mean for the kids, but he does a really good job in talking to them about impact. Beyond the money, what do you want to be able to do? What do you want your impact to be in the community? How, from my perspective, we're going to generate wealth with this book because we're going to have multiple streams of income, but how do we want to use it as a platform to advance equity in finance and different things? And so I have life insurance, because when most of us pass away in the community, we do a GoFundMe. I told my family, ain't nobody raising not a single dollar for me. My kids are good.
We're not selling fish plates.
No, don't. And in Kenya, it is culturally the thing to do. And I've spoken to my family back home that we're good. Y'all just do the thing for the funeral, but my children are good because I have protected it to make sure that we're good. My next level actually with our attorneys is working on trust, building a trust, but then it is a very catchy term to say generational wealth, but if you are working and building it and you have children, make sure that you are incorporating them in that space. I bought land earlier this year in South End.
Can I stop you just real quick, because I want to get into home ownership and real estate as an investment tool as well. But I think one of the takeaways from what Shamim just shared is, if we're talking about generational wealth, let's make sure that it's multi-generational. If you have children, if you have nieces and nephews, your parents, whatever those multi-level of generations, and she's making sure that her children are earning income even now, so that when they're adults, they're not having to get it out the mud like so many of us had to. And so I think that's really, really important. And thank you, Shamim, for saying that. I want to level set for a second and share a couple statistics. I didn't want to get too nerdy during the panel, but I think it's important for you all to understand why we're having these conversations. April and Christian shared at the beginning kind of what economic mobility is and why it's important, and how Black and brown folks and families have a fraction of the wealth that our white counterparts. But this is some stats from literally the St. Louis Fed as recently as Q2 of 2023. Black and Hispanic families owned about 24 cents for every dollar of white family wealth. Y'all, 24 cents, less than a quarter on the dollar for Black and brown families. This is why we're having these conversations. This is why it's important, whether it's entrepreneurship or whether it's investing, savings, whatever it is. I wanted to kind of level set. To say it a different way, the median net worth of white families in the United States is $188,000, while for Black families, it's a mere $24,000. Net worth. That's including your house and your cars and any assets that you may have. And so let that sink in when you think about that data and why we're having these conversations and what you're doing in your day-to-day life to make sure that we're addressing those issues. And so we've talked about various avenues for creating, sustaining, and building wealth. And I want to circle back to Brandon again at Encompass Realty, but also Encompass Financial Partners. And you guys focus on helping folks from a diverse background, as I understand, protect their long-term financial assets. You mentioned diversification, and I want to talk a little bit about real estate. We hear a lot of folks, home ownership for your primary residence, but also real estate as an investment tool.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about diversification and educate us about what that means exactly, and then also kind of home ownership in the realty world?
Well, I think when it comes to diversification, you know, my planning approach and my firm, our approach is very comprehensive. So we believe, you know, first in asset protection and risk management, and then we move into the investment planning and diversified investment strategies, and then we go into retirement planning, and then from there, we help our clients with, once you do all of that stuff with the stocks and the bonds and the mutual funds, then the last conversation we'll typically have is around real estate investing, which I think is a very, very strong tool. One of the things that I want to say too, that to kind of connect this with generational wealth, specifically with real estate investing, is oftentimes when you're trying to build wealth in a real way, you're often looking for these liquidity events. Right, these.
Tell us what liquidity means, just
sure.
to break it down for us.
It's just cash, right? It's just cash. It's lump sums of cash, and there's no, you know, there are lots of ways to go about it, but one of the greater ways to go about it is through real estate, right? And real estate investing, and through these liquidity events, it allows you to then take that cash and then either reinvest in real estate or additional properties, or diversify into other assets. So. Yeah, I mean, you know, real estate is extremely important. I think it's extremely important for our community. You know, one of my personal strategies is, you know, you don't live in your first home that you buy, you live in your third home. You know, you buy one and you rent it, you buy another one, you rent that one, and then if the numbers line up, then you live in your third one. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about the steps that you all are looking for. So do we have homeowners in the room? Just by show of hands, if you don't mind. And some of us are still renting, right? And so why is it important to own a home? And again, there's a lot of different reasons why or why not, the personal preferences. But can you talk about the value of owning that home? And then, Shamim, I want to talk to you about what the bank may look for on that.
Well, I mean, I think the obvious thing is just kind of that home will build equity. It is an asset. It's almost like a savings
And
account.
I'm sorry, I keep chiming in, but equity. To break it down even further, what does that mean if there's equity, and you build equity if you own a home as opposed to renting a home, and what that means?
Absolutely. Obviously, you're not building any equity when you're renting, but when you're buying, it's just the cash that accumulates within the property. So
you own something that can turn into cash for you, whether
absolutely.
you sell it or not. Okay.
Absolutely, and it's also something that can be passed down. So I think one of the greatest forms that other cultures use for the passing down of generational wealth is real estate. You know, how many examples do we know of certainly there's a lot of these on the East Coast where, you know, grandmother bought, you know, some property for $90,000 or $100,000, and now it's being, you know, passed down and it's worth $2, $3, $4 million. So that's a very, very, very quick way to accumulate wealth. So
absolutely. And Shamim, you talked about what the bank may look for. Why is credit important? We haven't really hit on that, and I want to talk a little bit about what you all look for from a credit score perspective. And I know it's not your expertise, but we encourage you to go through the game of life and talk to folks about building credit and some resources for that. But can you talk a little bit about why credit is important and how you all as a financial institution look at that to extend credit?
Yes, I'll speak to that, but to add on to the equity piece, so I was able to purchase my house 6 years ago. I used a down payment assistance program. Kim Marshall at the time, she's in the room somewhere with OZK, was my banker. She was my loan officer. And I was able to get the Addy fund. So like I said, I was doing DoorDash. So, you know, I was able to get almost $9,000 for my down payment. However, this year, I was able to refinance my house, and as an employee at Encore Bank, we have a 1% home loan program. So what I did, I refinanced at 1%, I pulled my equity out, had cash, and that is what I have funded my son's dream of the book. Didn't go to a bank because I was the bank.
Because she had equity.
I had
owning
equity.
her
Now, I
own.
didn't pull all the equity out because I would have been balling. You know? So I just made sure I had a plan. And that has allowed me to fund our book. And it's an expensive venture, writing a book, right? I didn't get on it anyway. So that is what equity can do. I was able, literally earlier in the spring, I was able to fund it. And then I was able to purchase land on South End that I'm planning to do. I'm wanting to buy the block, actually, before I could do it. But I'm wanting to put up a duplex. One, because I want the two babies to each have a key. But then that is going to be, you know, some affordable housing and different things. And so I was able to leverage my home and the equity to multiply that. And I'm very fortunate, again, because I work at a bank, I can go to the second floor and they advise me. But the benefit and the power of a credit score is really, it determines to the bank we look at two things. We're going to look at your credit score and we're going to look at your credit report. And it determines your financial power. What can you do? How can you buy? What are the rates going to be depending on how you manage it? So for Encore, our minimal credit score is 620. There are other banks that go higher, lower, but it depends on the programs. Like we have a 100% financing program. That minimum score for that is 640. But what most people in the public don't know is we're going to pull all three scores and we're going to go with the middle score. So whatever TransUnion is going to tell us, and Equifax, and the third one, I forget, all three, we're going to go with the middle score. And depending on how you range on there, we can determine what your purchase power is. And so that's how home rates come about. We don't qualify people based on the house you saw on Zillow and it's $250,000. We're going to approve you based on the monthly payment. How much debt do you already have? And if we throw in this mortgage, can you afford to have all your debt plus this house be less than 45% of your debt? And so that is why understanding your credit score is important, but really understanding your debt to income ratio, you can calculate that for yourself. I am happy to meet with you, have coffee, whatever, to help you figure out how to determine your debt to income ratio. But that's the real key, because the less debt you have, the more leverage you can use any financial institution.
That's a lot of really good information. Credit score, those minimum numbers, making sure that your debt is low compared to your income. And also she mentioned 1% rate. That interest rate is the amount of money that you have to pay on top of what you borrow. And so I want to make sure that's clear for our audience. 1% is low. You don't find that at most banks, but your credit score will impact what your interest rate is. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Correct.
Absolutely. So another thing Shameen mentioned was buying back the block. And I want to talk to Myron a little bit about that, because while Myron has seen success as an entrepreneur over 27 years, I didn't realize it had been that long, Myron, in your business. Can you talk a little bit about other investment opportunities you've been able to make once you've kind of achieved the success in your entrepreneurship, and specifically talk about the South End and what you've been able to do there recently?
Gotcha. Well, I will say this, looks like the better half of my family just stepped in, the brains of the operation. Sweetheart, will you stand? Well, yeah, you know,
yes,
I did you like that. Go ahead and stand, baby.
The
Go ahead and
Mrs.
stand.
Stephanie
Absolutely.
Jackson
Absolutely.
here.
I tell everyone I was smart enough to marry someone that's smarter and better looking than me. So I was a leg up from day one, indeed, from that. But we've been fortunate enough. This has been a journey. I'm the one on stage, but the reality, we've done this together. Our family kind of business. A couple of things that we've been very intentional in trying to do is that never forget that not everyone was fortunate enough to pull themselves out of a situation. The analogy that we use is that lack of access to capital and lack of access to information is like standing on a beach. For any of you guys who've been on the beach and seeing the waves crashing against the shore, no matter how bad you may want to get out to sea, until you can get over those waves that are crashing to the shore, you can't get out to sea. Those waves may be constant debt. Those waves may be a child gets sick and you can't get past whatever your financial burden is. Those waves may be you're trying to move to a better paying job, but you can't get there. It can be a number of waves that are constantly crashing. And what we see there is that when you see those waves constantly crashing in black and brown communities, you understand part of that is because of the issue with affordable housing and economic development. So oftentimes folks may be fortunate enough to pull themselves out, and then they go take their resources elsewhere. One of the things that my wife and I have been committed to is reinvesting into communities that look like the ones we're from. I share with everyone whatever progress and looks like for you. Coming out of the East End, I don't have the benefit because the community I knew no longer exists. So there were some other communities I was excited about, in particular in Ward 1, and that was really a part of town that was near and dear to me. My mother's folks were from the East End. My father's folks were from the South End. Any South End folks in the room?
South
okay,
End in
there
the
we
house.
go, there we go.
I see a couple.
So, and anybody remember Mr. Sears Barbershop? There we go, there we go. One of the things that we saw is what is known as MLK today used to be High Street. Anybody remember High Street? And High Street used to be vibrant. Used to be a lot of personality. It was a major artery in this city. Over the years, it really started to scale back and disappear. It became almost this forgotten place in Ward 1 and in the city. And one of the things that my wife and I have really been challenged with, where do we reinvest? So when we started thinking in terms of creating options and diversifying, real estate has been a critical component for ours. So not only is it residential real estate, but also commercial real estate. So we've been very deliberate in saying that we want MLK to be what High Street once was. We want to make sure that we address these scatter site properties where there's no development. We want to make sure that it's a mixed environment of commercial and residential, and we've been trying to invest our resources and to be completely frank, a place where we may not benefit in our lifetime. We understand that. So when we start to talk about assets that we will pass on, this may be something that our children's children benefit from. And then now we're looking at what are the strategies. So we lean on talented folks like you, Brandon, to say, should we put that in a revocable trust? How should we use that asset to ensure that as we amass wealth, we don't give it to the tax man when we go to heaven to see grandma?
Absolutely.
So how do we figure out how to adjust? And I won't get into your space. I'll let you talk a little bit about that. But we're committed throughout Ward 1 to address residential properties as well as understand and addressing commercial properties as well. So we've been really fortunate and lucky that we do have relationships with bankers that we challenge to say that we want you to not only allow us to put our resources in your bank, but we want you to use some of those resources to invest in our community.
Right.
So it's been really good. It's been working out for us, and we're constantly looking for opportunities. And I know there are other folk in this room that are doing some similar things,
Absolutely.
so kudos to you. The idea of truly buying back the black block, there was a lyric that kind of near and dear to me with Jay-Z, that we've got to quit fighting over the neighborhood our mama's renting. So at some point we have to understand the powers and ownership. And going back to what I said earlier, if the powers and ownership, understanding that wealth is not only about making a lot of money, it's about having options. So what those options allow us to do is to say, well, we believe we can invest in this commercial enterprise. And this commercial enterprise can build up the community. It can create wealth for us in terms of equity and growth and the value of that asset. It also, depending on where it's located, can allow us with some tax liabilities. So there are a number of things that you can do when you simply reinvest into the community in which you come from that will allow you to amass wealth and then be able to pass that wealth on to the next generation.
This is good stuff, y'all. I could talk to them all day because I feel like there's so many valuable follow-ups, but the onus is on you. We're kind of giving you a little sprinkling of information, but we ask that you reach out to some of these panelists, talk to the vendors that are here to make sure that you're following up and getting this information. We talked high level about some of the investment vehicles. If you're looking to start investing, retirement through your 401ks, stocks and bonds and mutual funds, even CDs at banks. We talked about real estate as an investment tool, and also how the equity in the home that you own, the value and all of that. I need you guys to do your homework and follow up. That's the key. As many folks that you touch and talk to here, we're incentivizing it by giving you an extra entry into our raffle to make sure that you're engaging with these folks, so you follow up with them and get the information you need to make sure you're moving up the economic ladder. But I want to also give you an opportunity. I have a lot of questions. I can nerd out all day, but I want to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. So we'll get a volunteer with a microphone to see if you have questions. Just by show of hands, we'll go to the audience. I see one here up front.
And we're going to say, I'm a member FDIC. We regulators, so we got to speak around inside the box, but we'll try to be honest.
How you doing? Xavier Chapman, recent graduate from Philander Smith College. I had a question for the entire panel. What tips would you all give young people for building credit?
Close. Hold it a little close.
What tips would you all give young people for building credit in order to move into a bigger segue to do certain things? Like you mentioned, Ms. Shameen, y'all don't look at the business credit, you're looking at that personal credit. So what do we need to do as young people to make sure that our credit score is adequate enough to navigate in life how we want to in order to build that generational wealth?
Okay, happy to take that. Number one, annual credit report is free. Post-COVID, you can access it once a week and pull all 3 reports. So understanding, Experian and them give these 8 models of credit scores, but the credit report is going to be accurate across the board. What you pull is what we're going to pull at the bank as the lender. So being able to access your own credit report. When folks come, my clients come, I'm not an originator, so I hand off to my team. I make sure that they know what is on their credit report. Don't be shocked that you got a collections because you moved and didn't pay an apartment. It's right there. It's free. So annualcreditreport.com. There is, I'm not sure if in their room, I'm a bank, but I'm going to shout out Southern Bancorp, Ebony Sanders at Southern Bancorp. They have on their community partners segment, they have free credit counselors. And she can pull your credit report, and it is a soft pull. When I pull it at the bank, it's a hard pull. Ebony and her team can pull it as a soft pull, and she will work with you and work a budget, so being honest about your spending and your budget. So Southern Bancorp is a great partner for us. They recently opened up their branch on 12th Street. To be able, if you need extra hand holding, that they can walk you through your credit report and what that looks with your budget. But at the end of the day, you want your debt to be low, you want your score to be high, and you want your savings to be high. If you can keep your debt under 30% utilization, I'm very fortunate. I attended Spelman College and the Clinton School. I had full scholarships, so I'm debt free. It's allowed me to move differently than a lot of the Americans. And so, being able to understand that, working whatever you can to manage your debt, bringing low, but essentially the lower the debt you have is automatically going to roll into a higher score, but you have to have the skills and the talent and the team and the support. If you don't have the discipline to do it by yourself, there's a slew of bankers. I know my friend's First Community Bank is around the corner. Jose, we have teams that are able to work with you, but Southern Bancorp is really great for assisting folks with kind of credit counseling.
So we'll go to Myron, and then I want to make sure we get as many questions as we can.
Absolutely.
So Myron.
And I'll try to be brief to that
Thank
point. Really quickly, how many students are in the room? How many other students? Okay, first thing I would say is don't make the mistakes that me and some folks that I know. Don't go get every card because they show up on the campus.
Preach.
Amen.
Don't go get every card. I saw the credit card coming on campus, and I was like, woo woo! And I tried to fill out every application they would let me. Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and anybody else. I would first say steer away from those. The truth is they're not going to give you real credit limit anyway. It's going to be $500, $1,000. But that $500 can ruin your credit for 7 years. So you don't want to do that. 2, leverage the asset that you have in your household. Maybe go to your parents if they have the opportunity to have credit. Ask them to add you to their credit card. They're going to make sure that they're paying their bill on time, but because you're on the card as well, you benefit from their positive credit. If you say, hey, mama and them ain't got no credit either, we all trying to figure it out, or if you're saying, hey, I choose not to use credit, if I can't pay with cash, I'm not rolling. Then you may, one, just decide, okay, then realistically as a student, I'm not going to jump into something I don't understand. So the first thing I would do is, again, kind of circling back, try to gain any knowledge or access you can in terms of how does credit work. I know you talked a little bit about 30% utilization and things of that nature. That was completely foreign to me. If I had $500, I was spending $501. And that's the truth. And I learned the hard way early in my collegiate career that makes no sense. So again, if I had to speak directly to college students, stay away from the credit cards. Focus on what you can do in terms of managing your cash flow. If you can't pay for it with cash as a college student, don't step into that space. And then when you're ready to access credit, when you're ready to move into that, speak with someone who has greater knowledge or experience on how to approach that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, going back to education, making sure you're getting those resources. I see we have a question over here.
Okay. Thank you all for being here and providing the information. I am a recent widow, and I moved to the Little Rock area recently this year. And I kind of like using this time as a starting over. So what advice would you give somebody who now, as a single mom, starting over to build wealth for her family?
I'm so sorry for your loss. Is that for Shamim specifically?
I would just offer to have lunch with you on the bank. This Encore Bank gonna pay for it, girl. And we can just, it's important to me to hear the story and the dream because there's no one size fits all. And I think, you know, understanding where you are, what's possible, what's the reality, and then, you know, I do a really, you know, my kids do it actually better than me in terms of setting goals and vision boards and all of that, and it's real. And just understanding after loss, you know, the fear that comes with it and wanting to protect it for her. She's too young, you know, but what are those strategies we can deploy? But more importantly, covering you with a community of professionals that, you know, I'm as a banker, but then other folks that might have other additional resources so that we can cover you collectively. So I didn't answer the question because I would love to have lunch with you.
Take her up on that. She really means it. I think there's on this side. We're going to go to somebody. Okay. Right here. Is there one over there too? Okay, so we'll go back and forth.
Good afternoon. My question is, when you have credit card debt, I mean, you have credit cards, but you're not using that credit. How does that affect you financially? Say if you have a $20,000 credit limit on your credit card, but you're not using it, and if I come to the bank and I need to get a loan, how will that affect my debt to ratio?
So that is called revolving debt, right? It's a revolving account. So what we normally like to see is some activity. You can put your Netflix bill on there. It's $12 and it's just auto paying for it. You don't want to close it. But if it is $20,000 and there's nothing, it's good. But then what we look at when we look at credit reports is your ability to pay. So if we're going to give you X amount in financing, what's your history in paying us? That's why late payments is normally the biggest chunk of people's score, and we want to see that. So not paying anything also kind of hurts you just because it's sitting there. So you want to at least throw one bill on there just to show that it's a segment of the revolving, but then it's to your benefit. You don't have to go deep into debt with it, but just throw one or two things. That way it's recurring and you're paying it, you know, often.
And we had a credit specialist that was supposed to be here. He had a last minute issue to come up. And so we'll have more information about credit specifically. But thank you, Shameen, for addressing that.
And I'll be really brief. This is just my personal experience. I found that in working with a number of financial institutions, it's really the diversification in what type of credit you have. A credit card with a great limit is fabulous. You want to be mindful of your utilization, but not only are we going to look at revolving credit, they're also going to look at installment loans. They're going to look at how you've paid in terms of maybe a car payment or whatever the case may be. So I would say, and you know, again, talk to an expert, but it's in how you diversify your access to credit. You go into a bank and you've got a credit card and you've done a great job, you've got a $20,000 limit, but you never utilize that. So in their mind's eye, you've got access to credit, but we still don't understand how you pay your bills. So when you start to think in terms of access to credit and how you're utilizing that, we find, what I found and experienced, it all impacts my credit score on how I utilize those assets to increase the score.
Good info. Go over here.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I have a question because I bought a house like over 10 years ago. And like you say, you don't know what you're getting into. I went through the, what are those things, those classes, and got some of the down payment things. So because people were saying, you know, buy a house so that you'll have something to pass on to your children so that you can have, but I didn't know that it generated equity or money. I didn't know if I should be going to the bank every year trying to see, you know, what equity is in my home and what to do with it. So now my children, there's 7 of them, they're going to eat or travel my home away. So my mom was trying to get away, and I'm talking to them about selling my house, and y'all like, no, have the asset. So how do we get the family to the table? What type of resources do we get to the table, and who do we get to help us figure out what to do now?
I want to jump in real quick. I hope you're going to be here for the rest of the day. We have our last panel before the pitch competition is Family Don't Feud, and it's going to talk about that passing down of assets, that estate planning and things of that sort. So if you don't mind, I want to table that, and we have someone specifically to address that question. I'll make sure we'll follow up with you about that. Thank you so much.
Yes, great. This is great. So I just recently moved back here 2 years ago, and I'm an investor, and so one of the things I was concerned about, you know, coming back from California, I actually cashed in on a lot of properties that I was invested in out there. So I'm coming back here and dropping a lot of cash, paying for new bills, and so one of the things that I'm having some issues with is that there's a lot of competitors that we don't even, that no one has mentioned, and they are foreign competitors. So when I go and bid for property or for land down here, I'm actually competing with Asians that are going through other conglomerates that are buying properties in our community by the droves and becoming very wealthy kind of individuals. And they never, it's the property they purchase is sight unseen. They might even live in China. And also one of the things that Charmin, you didn't mention when you said the three C's, what about school loans? When I became an early investor, school loans were a big problem when it comes to qualifying for financial loans to buy property. But I'm sure that that's one of the considerations that still certainly exists. Can you speak on that as well?
You mean student loan debt specifically?
Yes, exactly.
So I would just say, obviously, whenever it comes to it, and I'll try to stay in my lane, is there's normally a calculation on the variation. People had it deferred for 3 years, and that should have actually been when folks were paying down their student debt, because they would have reduced that principal. However, the bankers and the financial counselors can kind of tap into it because there is a ratio on it. There have been some laws now that have reduced, like if X amount on medical debt doesn't show up and different things. But then I think the bigger question, your first part, and I think Brandon can speak to that, is seeing this big conglomerates on investments, investors coming in. When I purchased my land, and Shannon, who's on the afternoon panel, she has a space, she was my realtor, the seller is in Vegas. it was a transaction. They don't even live here. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of that in Southwest, with a lot of homes. They're going to talk about it where grandma passed away or mama, the family came. One person want to keep it, the other sibling want to sell it. And then it gets lost, and then an investor comes in and swoops in. And so the best we could do in my space as a banker, as a single mom, as an investor myself, is educating folks about the importance of buying within our community, being able to, because we're going to have a personal interest, right? Because it's we ride around it, but then at some point we cannot compete with the investors and their arms and their money. But a lot of times, now that I work at the bank, they don't have cash like that. They are using a line of credit at the bank. They are not cash heavy, I can tell you that. They are using a line of credit, but then when they make it,
or even if they are,
yeah, and they have resources, and it looks like it's a cash offer, but they're pulling it from a line of credit and then paying it back within a year.
Thank you so much. So we're at time, but this is so good. I want to get one more question and then allow our panelists to say just kind of some final words, what we want them to take away from entrepreneurship, from banking, from investment. So if you guys will be thinking about that, but take one more question. And again, we're here all day, guys, and so loosen up. We're going to be able to answer your questions later as well. So one more question here.
Good evening, everyone. So Roth IRAs has been one of the most beneficial retirement plans that has helped me grow my wealth. So can any of the panelists talk about that versus 401ks? Because we all know what 401ks is. It's essentially the same thing, but black people are so afraid to invest in the stock market, but the 401k is the stock market, if you guys didn't know. They're investing your money. So can you guys touch on that, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. Brandon, if you don't mind.
That's probably my lane. Yeah, so I love them both. Look, I think you should maximize all investment opportunities. From my experience now, you all, a 401k is not going to be enough for you to retire. You're going to have other vehicles, whether it's a Roth, and not to get too high level with the conversation, but I also believe that all of your assets don't necessarily need to be tied to the market. There are some assets that you can have that you can leverage that are what I consider non-correlated assets. So there's about three, and that is whole life insurance, there's a home equity line of credit, and then there's cash. Right, so diversifying in terms of a non-correlated asset is also something that I think is really good in terms of diversified planning, because once you enter into retirement, what's your biggest risk? It's running out of money, right? People are living longer and they're outliving their dollars. So what do? We obviously know that the market is extremely volatile. What do you do when the market is down? Right? Are you still going to pull from those assets that are tied to the market? Right? Are you just going to experience extreme depletion of that asset? But to have an asset, multiple assets that are not only tied to the market, but also having assets to consider that are not tied to the market. So when that volatility comes, you either have some cash or you have another non-correlated asset that you can pull from to live off of while you wait for the market to rebound. So yes, a Roth is good, 401k is good, all that's good stuff.
Can I add real quick? So whenever I joined Encore, I moved my 401k from wherever I was because they were having a private capital raise, and they needed $25,000, and I was silly and didn't know. I'm an immigrant. Shout out to Benito, from Tanzania. We don't do none of this stuff in Kenya. So I had about just under $24,000, but I was able to move that 401k when I left, and I was able to come in as a shareholder at the bank. So I can sit here and say I own a bank, because I am a shareholder. But one of the things for the folks in the room with children, part of their income is I can move the $12,000 and put it into a Roth for kids up to 6%, $6,000. And the benefit of it, my son is 10, my daughter is 8. The benefit of Roth for that young is it accumulates its compound interest over time. Again, I want them to be the bank. And so being able to take, what I learned and didn't know, and literally I've been in banking for 2 years, and just transforming the spaces I'm being into and not only using it for myself to be a shareholder at a bank, but setting up my children too with Roth IRA investment accounts.
So we started the conversation talking about investment vehicles. That's one of them: Roth, 401ks, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Find a professional and make sure that you sit down and identify your risk tolerance, what you have the capacity for and what you can afford, and make sure that you're starting those based on your personal needs. And so this has been awesome. I want to give you all 30 seconds. I know it's hard because they have so much knowledge, right? Can we give them a hand before? They've been amazing. If you can give us, 30 to 45 seconds, parting words for an aspiring entrepreneur, or a single mom who's trying to build wealth for her family, or someone who's really trying to get started in investments, whatever you want to speak to, kind of give them kind of those last strategies, best practices, or leave them with some parting words. Myron, do you mind kicking us off?
Yeah, no problem at all. I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, is don't be afraid to sell your time. Oftentimes for many folk, it's getting over that fear. There's some comfort in knowing that every 2 weeks or every week, here's what I know I'm going to have in my bank account. But being able to really step out there on faith and understand that that there's a lot to be had, a lot of reward to be had based on that risk. So don't be afraid to sell your time. Don't be afraid to sell your time. You're not going to always get it right. You're not going to always score big or knock a home run the first time out, but a solid double is okay. And just stay focused and stay consistent. I tell everyone, and I'll be very brief here, I don't think my success is based on how smart I was. It's based on how consistent I was. And so I would say just stay consistent, stay focused, and try to continuously educate yourself about the industry you want to pursue.
Thank you, Myron. Shameen.
I'll say two things. Number one, establish a relationship with your banker. Wherever you have your accounts, figure out who that person is. Ask them to sit down with you for coffee, 30 minutes. If they say no or give you a round, you can call me. I don't want to steal. I'm going to give them a chance. But wherever you have your accounts and deposits, establish a relationship with the banker. When you call them, your email comes through, they need to know you and what you're about. Number one. Number two, we have our book coming out. I know Jada back there, we're working on our website. If you have Instagram, we're working on our handles, but ellathebanker.com, Ella the Banker is on our IG handle. Follow us. We are shooting for January. My publishing company doesn't want me to say the date in case we got to move it, but we're shooting for January 9th, which is a Tuesday, to release our book that is going to focus on commercial banking, and we would love you to support us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shameen. Brandon.
I would say plan, right? Connect with someone. That's something that's not very popular in our community is, conversations around, finances. Where, that's a very taboo subject in the African American community. Having a financial advisor or a financial planner is something that we oftentimes think that is for wealthy people. And it is, but not all the time. But plan, live within your means. To your point and your question, you young people out there, you don't need a Rolex right now. You don't need a Mary jeans right now. You don't need the BMW right now. Take your time, make the right decisions, plan, have someone that will help you with a comprehensive approach as it pertains to tax strategies, savings strategies, debt reduction strategies, investment strategies, retirement strategies, distribution strategies, estate planning, wills, trust, all of those things. I was having a conversation with someone, what if, there's so much crime going on right now. What if all of those individuals had a $100,000 life insurance policy? Well, now you have these big life insurance companies. Now they have to pay attention to our community, right? Forget all the GoFundMe's, but, just plan. I don't want to go on a rant here, but plan, save, make sound decisions, and just don't buy stuff you don't need. There's time for that. There's time to get the Jimmy Choo and the Prada and the Louis Vuitton. There's time for that. So.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for giving your time today to share your wealth of information and insight to this great crowd. Isn't this amazing? The first annual CapitalCon. I want to give a quick shout out. We have City of Little Rock information. There'll be a QR code. We have down payment assistance programs. We have some financial literacy through community programs. We have housing and neighborhood programs here. Tracy, Shine, if you'll raise your hand. I know there's Tracy right there to talk about down payment assistance. Community programs is here. I know I see Michael Sanders in the back. He's waving. Please connect with the City of Little Rock. We have resources, and we want to make sure that we're connecting you with other partners in our city to make sure that you're economically mobile. Thank y'all again for being here. We're just getting started, but based on what they shared today, building generational wealth requires strategic planning, some discipline, and long-term vision planning to make sure that you get you and your family where you need to be. So please take that away from here. We're going to do a quick break, and I know our host is coming back up. Thank you guys so much, and let's keep it going. Keep the energy up.